Hey, it's Mazzy here. Welcome back. I am so excited about this video. You can just see the passion and the love for music just dripping from this video. This is a result of the most requested question and requested request I've had since I've been making videos. People want to know my top 10 favorite bands of all time. Now, if you watch my videos, you kind of know. Maybe you don't know the order, but you know. And of course, I couldn't just do top 10. So this is top 25. I have ranked them. And despite what people say, rankings get viewers. You, except that guy over there, loves ranking videos. And you're curious. You can speed ahead and enjoy this video. Now, I have some self-imposed rules. No and bands, which means no Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band, no Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. These are rock bands. There are no soul bands. There are no jazz bands. And I realize there are hardly any prog bands. Oh my God. Actually, there are no prog bands. There are more art rock bands, possibly. But this is my list. And if there's going to be that guy, and it's mostly guys that say, you forgot Aerosmith. How could you forget Thin Lizzy? How can you forget Lothar and the Hand People? Well, I didn't forget them. I didn't include them. These are the ones I picked. And the other thing I will say, I've been working on this list for months, in fact, years, sort of. And every time I put this list together, it changes up somewhat. And I've already, from me typing out the list and printing it out, I've crossed out certain things and moved them around several times. So here we go. And I picked one record to represent the band. I thought about picking 3 records. It would just take too friggin' long. So I picked one record, and they're not necessarily my favorite records, but I think it's a record that represents these bands as I listen to them, how I like to listen to them. Usually albums that I may pull first, but that's not an absolute. So starting number 25, already I hear the people screaming, 25, that should be in your top 10, Mazzy. Well, it ain't. Number 25, Led Zeppelin, 1969 debut. What a great debut. To me, this is their best album, hands down, nothing better, so different. What a wonderful record. I did see the documentary. I made a video on it. You watched it. A lot of people watched it, but this is the one. Just the way it was recorded, the sound of it, the arrangements here. I mean, Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You, that traditional song that Jimmy Page arranged. I've known that from Quicksilver Messenger Service. So many people, some folk singers doing that song, and I love it. But the Willie Dixon song, You Shook Me. Of course, Black Mountain Side, that acoustic. I think Bert Jansen, a lot of folk guitar artists I know did that. But of course, you know the album. I don't need to pontificate anymore on it. Number 25, my 25th favorite band in the world, Led Zeppelin, at least today. Coming at number 24. Now, I cheated a little bit. I combined 2 bands, and you'll see why. Coming at number 24 is Cream, one of the best psychedelic blues records ever. I almost pulled Wheels of Fire because it has a combination of this band at its peak, at its live peak, that wonderful, with Crossroads and Spoonful, and I'm so glad this is the one. And psychedelic is meant to be played in stereo. I even have a UK original mono, but this is the stereo UK version, one of them, not the original, later Gem import, but this is it. This is the cover and everything through it. It's a perfect psychedelic blues album. And then the other one I'm keeping up, number 24, Blind Faith. Now, despite what other YouTubers have said recently about this record didn't replace the cover of this record. They both came out simultaneously. I remember the weekend it came out, my buddy Larry and I went to Tower Records, Columbus and Bay, walked in the store, and they had the 2 stacked piles of each cover. And at the time, I bought this one. Years later, I would get this one. This is such a bland cover. I understand the controversy, but there's an innocence to it. So anyway, Blind Faith, it's a great record. Of course, Stevie Winwood adds with Ginger Baker and Eric Clapton and Rick Gretsch. I just think it's a wonderful, wonderful record. And It's too bad they burn brightly so short of a time. But Blind Faith and Cream, that magic period of what, 66, 67, 68, fantastic, fantastic music. Coming in at number 23, and this is a band that a handful of my friends, it's in their top 3 bands of all time. But I love them too. But this is the one that really grabbed me. I had their earlier, more straight ahead country rock records, but that is Wilco. And this is, of course, you know, it still is their masterpiece, Yankee Hotel Foxtrot, the record that Warner Brothers wouldn't want you to hear. And the label, it's so bizarre that it's Warner's that wouldn't put it out. I mean, come on, they used to be the most creative label, and their sister parent label, Nonsuch, puts it out and became this great piece. And it's a fantastic little bit of an avant-garde crossover with country and minimalism and experimental jazz thing. It's just a really great album, and it holds its own. I have most of their records, and I think Wilco is a fantastic band. I've seen them twice. Wilco, important band, one of the great American bands to this day. I didn't include Los Lobos either. I don't know why I thought of them right this moment. But see, already you're going to say you should have included Los Lobos, one of the great last bands standing. Coming in at number 22, I think a great band, and an original band on the way, started out more punk, crossed over a little bit in dance, electronic disco stuff, and is Blondie. And Parallel Lines, I think, is a great representation that crosses over with Hanging on the Telephone, One Way or Another, which is a real driving, punkish type song, Sunday Girl. I just love this record. Of course, Debbie Harry, Chris Stein, the whole band. Blondie at number 22. Coming in number 21, a very important band, is The Doors. Light My Fire was really a game changer. And this band really sort of fused sort of a jazzy rock and roll thing. A great, performance, obviously, Jim Morrison, and the great kind of Vox organ-like keyboards of Ray Manzarek. I mean, the whole band, Robbie Krieger and John Densport. What a band. Burned brightly, too, for a few years. I never saw them live, one of the big mixes in my life. Now, just to remind you, with the and bands, I didn't include Jimi Hendrix Experience. He's, to me, a solo artist, so there. So coming in number 21, The Doors. Coming in at number 20, a band that really changed everything in 1976, and that is the Ramones. Obviously, punk music. I saw them twice, 2 nights in a row, I believe, at the Savoy Tivoli in North Beach. Either their first or their early on tour when they came to the West Coast. But the Ramones obviously burned brightly. Nobody's name is Ramon, by the way. I just talked about that when I was talking about the Walker Brothers, same kind of scenario. But the Ramones coming in number 20. Coming in at number 19, again, the punk scene crossing over into art scene, and a band that really developed over the years coming out of the CBGB world of New York. Art school to the fullest, such the perfect, in a way, cliche art school band that just was amazing. And that is Talking Heads at number 19, their debut. There's a soulful funkiness to this record, which I don't think I realized it until recently playing the reissue. This is an original copy of this debut, Talking Heads 77. It's just a great record and a great time for New York music. And all these bands were very different, the Ramones and Blondie and Talking Heads, but a lot of great music, television came out of that period. So Talking Heads, number 19. Number 18, another band that didn't have a long shelf life. They did have a reunion project years later, but of course that is 1966, Velvet Underground, 66, 67, with this classic Andy Warhol cover, Velvet Underground and Nico, with the model singer Nico. I mean, you don't even know the band's name, but you get Andy Warhol's name. This is a 71 copy, it never peeled it. Of course, Lou Reed and John Cale as well, and Sterling. And I mean, this is a great record. And again, you all know it, but Velvet Underground coming in number 18, favorite bands. I think, again, an original band doing something that no one else was doing at the time. Kind of a drone-like minimalism mixed with rock and roll and lo-fi. We didn't know what lo-fi was when this album came out. Coming in at number 17, a band that when I got this record, this hit the charts right away too. At least got FM radio play, the FM charts. And this is my original promo copy. You can see by the promo there, see that Warner Brothers Sire promo thing? And this is the debut by the Pretenders with Chrissie Hynde. And I saw them on this first tour. I think I saw them 5 times with the original members. Once was in Hamburg, Germany. And of course, Brass in Pocket was played everywhere. But Stop Your Sobbing, that great Kinks song that they covered, Brass in Pocket, as I said, the beautiful song Kid that I love. But the Pretenders debut, what a fantastic record. Their first 3-4 records are just wonderful, great hooks, sort of post-punk hooks and great songwriting. And Chrissie Hynde's voice is to die for. She even has that great sound today. The Pretenders. Coming at number 17. Coming at number 16, in terms of my favorite bands, Massey's favorite bands ever. Coming number 16 is Roxy Music. I'm picked Siren because Siren to me is that transition of the art rock, a little out there glammy thing, going into a little slicker, more accessible style. Now, I like their entire catalog. Obviously, I like their earlier, more interesting art sounds with Eno, but I love how this album starts with Love is the Drug and the steps and the motorcycle sounds. And when that kicks in, that is such a danceable, funky song. Sentimental Fool, Whirlwind. Every song on here is great. She Sells, and of course, Jerry Hall as the Siren on the cover of this album. I like all their albums. A lot of people will pick and pull out Avalon, which is a great, beautiful, slick audiophile record. People seem to like that more, but I think this album and the records prior to this they have the more guts in them and the more soul. They're not a soul band, but this to me is the one that really kind of is that transition between the art rock and the slickness that they would become. And those are great records too. I like them all. But Roxy Music here coming in number 16. Coming in at number 15. The only band that matters, The Clash. Saw them 3 times. Another one of those kind of crossover albums that really crossed punk with something a little more, if I use the word substantial, which I'm going to use, people think I'm dissing punk music, but you know what I'm talking about. There's a certain weight and a heft to this record, but a beauty to rock and roll on this record. Obviously, they hark back to old rock and roll and some covers. What's the song? Cadillac, Brand New Cadillac. London Calling, I mean, just phony Beatlemania has bitten the dust. That kind of says it all for, this is 1979, this record came out. A double album, of course, the next year they do that triple album, Sandinista. I love the mix of these British bands around this time, the punk bands that were bringing in dub and reggae and stuff. But what a great record, and I do love the mix of Joe Strummer's voice and Mick Jones's voice. A friggin' great band, and this great cover emulating the first Elvis Presley record on RCA. It's just a really great record. So The Clash coming at number 15. Coming in at number 14, Fleetwood Mac. One may ask, which Fleetwood Mac, Mazzy? Fleetwood Mac is the only band that were successful and they only had the rhythm section that followed them through, right? Mick Fleetwood and John McVie, drummer and bass. They went through guitar players and vocalists. And I mean, this to me, 1970 is that sweet spot too. I think Then Play On is their best album. I mean, so this is one of the cases. I did a ranking of Fleetwood Mac records, and this was my number 1. Yeah, Rumors is fine. They became less of a British band, more of a California band, which is fantastic. By the way, I love Rumors. I love the self-title there. I love Tusk. After that, you know, Little Eyes, little eyes. Give me a break. My video, my taste. You're listening to Mazzy's taste. Don't yell out. You forgot. Obviously, the early R&B stuff, Albatross, just Peter Green's guitar playing. Then you have Jeremy Spencer, you have Danny Kerwin, you have Bob Welch, you have you have Lindsey Buckingham. What an amazing band. It's kind of like the school of rock is Fleetwood Mac, but they evolved. Obviously on the original pressing list didn't have the song Oh Well. Oh Well is on the American second pressing, which is on this version. It came out on a reissue with Rhino with a 45 of Oh Well, part 1 and part 2. An incredible piece of music. Peter Green, of all those British 60s guitar players, my favorite. Anyway, then play on Fleetwood Mac, number 14. Number 13. I think this is a band that doesn't get enough love, and I love them. This is art rock. Some people call them a little proggy. They're not a prog band. They have one of the best soulful voices in rock and roll, British rock and roll, and that's Procol Harum. I mean, oh my God. Gary Brooker, what a soulful, wonderful voice. Of course, the biggest song played in the UK, I think still to this day, more than the Pogues Christmas song. I didn't include the Pogues either, so sorry about that. But is Whiter Shade of Pale. But this is their second album. I quite like Salty Dog too, but this record, Shine On Brightly, was it 1968 or 69? When I got this, I remember every day I got home from school, I played this probably for a month. There was something really interesting about that. If you don't refer to that, 17, 18-minute song, In Hell 'Twas I on side 2 as a prog masterpiece, it's art rock. There's all these different components, great pieces by, lyrics by Reed. They have their own lyricist. They're one of those few bands that had, like Elton John with Bernie Taupin, Keith Reed, what's his name? Keith Reed. Keith Reed wrote these great lyrics for the band. Matthew Fisher on keyboards. And you have this great guitar playing here, Robin Trower, and it kills it on here. Great songwriting, great hooks, great production. I just love everything about this record. I love this kind of infrared cover. It looks as though you're underwater. Looks like SpongeBob's, girlfriend, sort of. But it's like in the desert here. It's just such a beautiful record. Different cover. I like the American cover better than the original UK cover here. Quite rightly so, is a beautiful song. Procol Harum. Procol Harum here, coming in at number 13. Coming at number 12, Kid A by Radiohead. OK Computer is on everyone's list. Obviously the Bends, they were more guitar focused, typical Brit pop British band, but they had something else. They had something a little more interesting, and I think they were in for the long haul, and not just one of those bands to repeat themselves over and over again with great hooks and great stuff. And when I heard this, I bought the CD of this, and I brought it in my office, and I listened to everything in its right place. I couldn't stop playing that tune. That electronic sound, of course this, and then Amnesia and everything else. I love this stuff. I know people long for the guitar-driven stuff, and some people don't like the blips and the blops and the this and the that from Radiohead, but this, to me, is a perfect record. Kid A changed everything for me, and it made me go back and get the few other albums that I didn't have. I like those a lot, quite a bit. But to me, this is the essence. And this is one of the first records. What year is this? 2001? 2001? My son was 10 or 11 years old, and we played this thing, and we both fell in love with it at the same time as well. And my son Joseph just loves this album. So there's a certain emotional connection to this album for me. So Radiohead coming in number 12. Coming in at number 11. Another British band, that burn brightly, they only had 4 albums in the 1980s, and that's the Smiths. Now, this is a comp, granted, and some people always think it's not fair to show comps, but this was originally an American-only comp that gathered together, singles and B-sides and parts and extra tracks that were left off things. Of course, I could pick The Queen is Dead or Meat is Murder or the debut. In fact, the debut, Reel Around the Fountain, was the song that sucked me into this band. My top 3 favorite bands of the 1980s. But this comp, Louder Than Bombs, really is a good introduction. It's not the hits. Yeah, you can get a greatest hits. You can get a best of by the Smiths. But this is a perfect comp. I always compare this comp to like the Autumn Small Faces comp, where it's some hits but mixed in with some alternate tracks and deep cuts, or weird scenes from the Gold Mine by the Doors, which has some hits but not even all the hits, but it has some deeper cuts too. I love a double album like this that really kind of mixes things up, not in chronological order, and just gives you great music. And this album, Louder Than Bombs, so if you have no Smiths, I suggest this. You're not going to get all the hits, but you're going to get great music over 2 LPs. So coming in number 11, the Smiths. So now we're in the top 10. So those of you who requested Mazzy's top 10, start your engines now. Push record on your tape recorders. There's nothing like a Grateful Dead concert. Now, I always suggest to people, Europe 72 is the place to start if you have no Dead. You know, people will say American Beauty and Working Man's Dead. Absolutely. But that only gives you one aspect of the Grateful Dead. That gives you that more in the acoustic, almost folk rock, Americana side of things, bluesy stuff, which is probably the 2 best recorded records the Dead ever did. But we all know the Grateful Dead are a live band. And Europe 72, over 3 records, brings some of that music. They did overdubs and they fixed up the vocals and they got themselves a little more in tune with music overdubs. But Europe 72 is a great introduction. But in terms of live records, now there's so many in box sets. But this is the first, and this is the real deal live Dead. Dark Star, side 1, 23 minutes, 15 seconds. Saint Stephen, the 11, Turn on Your Love Life, an entire side. That's with Pigpen. Death Don't Have Mercy, feedback. 9 minutes of feedback. Well, and We Bid You Goodnight for 36 seconds. The Inner Fold. This is Hate Street. I'm on my bicycle off to one side in this photograph. I could never find myself. So photographs by Jim Marshall and Herbie Green. I do want to do a shout out because the great photographer Herbie Green just died in the last week as I'm recording this in March of 2025. So my hat's off to Herbie Green. He did the cover of Surrealistic Pillow. That great backdrop was his wall in his North Beach apartment where he photographed not only the Airplane, but the Dead and so many other of the San Francisco bands in the day, in the 60s. And we just lost that great photographer. But this is the one. This is great American music by the Grateful Dead. And my number 10 band of all time, the Grateful Dead. Coming in at number 9, from the Bay Area, from El Cerrito, California, Creedence Clearwater Revival. I can't believe they came up, or at least John Fogerty came up with so many killer hooks in a short time. Now, this is their debut album from 1968. The song that hooked me in was their cover of the Dale Hawkins song, Susie Q. A lot of covers on here. I Put a Spell on You. But Fogerty and the band nail it. They make these songs theirs. They mix psychedelia, great guitar playing. 99 and a Half Won't Do. Sometimes this is my favorite album, but remember, even in 1969, they put out 3 huge hit albums. They were the biggest album in the Bay Area. And El Cerrito's right across the bay, north of Berkeley. They don't sound like they're from California. They sound like they're from the Delta or from the New Orleans. They are a great band, and you can't deny how friggin' great. They were only, maybe Jefferson Airplane, burned brightly in terms of Surrealistic Pillow and the two major hits they had in 67. But these guys had hits for about a 3-4 year period and wrote great songs and made great records, like one after another. They kept it going. Their debut is the one I pull most of the time, but I go back and forth on moods. And when people say all you need is a greatest hits from Creedence, you're friggin' crazy. You need to get their deep cuts. Their deep cuts are, if not as hooky and commercial in a way as the rest of the album, the deep cuts are so good. Creedence Clearwater Revival coming in at number 9. Coming in at number 8. We're going back to the UK again, and that's The Who. This is probably my favorite album. This and Tommy. I think it's much better than the 70s arena rock. I mean, I love Who's Next. I mean, come on. People think I'm crazy because I never put Who's Next number 1 or even Quadrophenia over Tommy. Tommy's the one. Tommy's the brilliant thing. But this, even the little commercial bits mixed in that they create, they actually tried to sell advertising or thought about it at least. This is a masterpiece, and it has what should have been one of the biggest singles of the 1960s, I Can See for Miles. Anyway, The Who, what a brilliant quartet, right? I mean, the bass playing of John Entwistle, Roger Daltrey singing, although, I usually prefer Townsend singing vocals. And of course, Keith Moon, the crazy Keith Moon. When you watch him play, I always can't believe that he's keeping on beat. He looks like the maniac back there. And fortunately, I saw The Who 3 1/4 times with Keith Moon. A quarter time being the time he passed out at the Cow Palace. It wasn't good. But from the Fillmore West to Winterland twice and the Cow Palace, and a great band, of course. Anyway, coming in at number 8, The Who. Coming at number 7. A lot of times they're higher. It depends on the mood I'm in. And people seem to not put this band higher. I'm sorry. Maybe it's a generational San Francisco thing, but it's the Jefferson Airplane. Of course, Surrealistic Pillow is the breakout album. It's their best album, okay? And not just the 2 hit singles on it. But it's amazing that in early 67, they put out that album. Every record company flocks to San Francisco to sign every friggin' band because of the Jefferson Airplane for the most part. And then later, towards the end of the year, they put out this out there, non-commercial, wonderful album. Again, you got to get the stereo one. There was a reissue. I think Sundays put out a mono one at some point. But again, psychedelia, it has to be stereo. Why did I whisper? Stereo. ASMR. There are some great commercial-ish songs on there. Martha, Paul Kantor song, Two Heads. I love this band, and this is an incredible record. I don't know. It doesn't seem so weird today as it did in 1967 when I first bought this. I thought, what is this? It was out there being a 13-year-old buying this record after Surrealistic Pillow. But Jefferson Airplane coming in at number 7. Coming in at number 6. Possibly, I think it's a tie. But people always ask, who is the best American band ever? The best American band ever. 2 of them, from my opinion, are in the top 10. This is one of them. Coming in at number 6 is R.E.M. Now, this is their debut LP. They had an EP prior to this with Gardening at Night. But when I heard this was very different too, obviously from Athens, Georgia. They really built up into the 80s and into the 90s. Automatic People in the 90s is, 93 or 4, is probably my favorite record. I think that's a perfect record. But this has the balls. This has the intensity. You know, there's people that'll argue every day about the IRS years, are they more gritty, they're realistic, and then they, you know, they sold their souls to Warner Brothers and got all this money, and, you know, and they did Losing My Religion, which is a great friggin' song. They did Automatic for People, which is a perfect album. But this, with Catapult, I just think this is a great record. And this isn't my favorite R.E.M. record, but it really represents something that was very different. I'm thinking this came out in 1981, maybe, was it? Ish, 81. You couldn't understand a word that Michael Stipe was singing, but it's so good. One of the great American bands, and they kind of turned off the lights when they saw the writing on the wall. You know, I think they went through a period in the last few years. Obviously, they had lost their drummer, and they still continued. But they still made great records. But some of them weren't as popular. But if you play those records now, there's some really good stuff on there. You have to invest a little more in it, and I kind of like that too. But, you know, they mixed rock and roll and rootsy stuff and acoustic instruments, and of course that great jingle, jangly Rickenbacker sound from Peter Buck on here. I just love R.E.M. Again, one of the great American bands ever. One of the two great American bands, if I had to pick two. Coming in at number 5, the Rolling Stones. How can you not? And I'm not putting the Rolling Stones in there just because, but they made so many great records. I picked this, even though this is an American comp, right? Because it really kind of has some of their best songwriting. Now, Beggar's Banquet and Let It Bleed are my two favorite Stones albums. And as great as they are, these are the better songs. Sympathy for the Devil, Street Fighting Man are better records. If you get my drift here, their song, in essence, is great. But Sympathy for the Devil, half the song is the way it's arranged, produced, and sounds. But you have a song like Ruby Tuesday, what a great song. Let's Spend the Night Together, Lady Jane, great song. Out of Time, Backstreet Girl, Mother's Little Helper, great song. Sitting on a Fence, great song. This is kind of great, like Baroque psychedelic pop music. You know, Marianne Faithfull said it best, that the Stones didn't do psychedelic very well. The Beatles did. They screwed it. But I would argue that Satanic Majesty's Request is an amazing record. There was that kind of friendly rivalry between the Stones and the Beatles, but this is kind of like that perfect, again, it's a bridge record in a way. It bridges to the more creative records they would do after this, the more blues. And I think, as much as of course I love Satisfaction and the early stuff, and Time Is on My Side. I love that stuff. And, I, like many others, I got into more R&B and blues stuff because bands like the Rolling Stones, rightly so. And but this is a perfect record. So coming in at number 5, the Rolling Stones. Coming in number 4, how can this band be bigger and better than the Rolling Stones? Well, it is for me, and that's Pink Floyd. And this is Metal Echoes. This is one of my favorite albums. I have an emotional connection to this album growing up. It's a beautiful record. Echoes, to me, is one of the most beautiful pieces of music on any modern pop record ever. I just even call it pop. It's not pop music in the classic sense. It's experimental. It's a little bit of an avant thing going. And it's jammy, but it's organized in parts, and something obviously some would say they would perfect with Dark Side of the Moon. I love the one right after this, Obscured by Clouds, the soundtrack to La Vallée. I think that is a perfect record. I like Adam Hartmother. I do love the Syd Barrett records, but to me, this is great. And they have, from 67 with Syd Barrett to up through Animals, and then The Wall, You know, even The Wall, as much as I like The Wall, I don't love The Wall. People love The Wall, like Quadrophenia. To me, I always put those two together. People love The Wall and Quadrophenia so much more than I do. I think there's some great stuff there, and I think they're bloated records. Sorry, guys. Sorry, girls. Sorry, Pink Floyd fans. But metal is the one, and of course, a favorite group. I was fortunate enough to see them play Echoes live the end of 1972, and they played the entire Dark Side of the Moon 6 months or so before it was released. And I love this band. And this is my fourth favorite band, Pink Floyd. Coming at number 3, now we're my top 3 bands. If you're one who's been watching me for the last 6 years, I've been doing this, you already know my top 3 bands. And sometimes 2 and 3 are reversed. I'll just leave it at that. Number 3, the Byrds. Along with R.E.M., the greatest American band of all time, the Byrds. They seem to be tossed aside by some people. 11 records they made, that was it. From 1965 to 1972-3-ish, the Byrds. There's the original members. This isn't, not everyone, you know who quit here is Gene Clark quit, but one of the greatest songs that he originally wrote is on here. It is 8 Miles High, possibly the first major psychedelic song of all time, influenced by John Coltrane. What a great, great record. Opens up side 2, 8 Miles High. You know, this band of the great Rickenbacker guitar playing of Roger McGuinn, Jim McGuinn, then Roger McGuinn, changed his name on religious purposes apparently. He saw George Harrison play that Rickenbacker in A Hard Day's Night, and he picked it up. And he was a folk guitar player, and he really mastered the 12-string and went beyond what George Harrison did with the 12-string and set a sound, that jingle jangle sound that went into psychedelic pop, bands like R.E.M., the whole Paisley underground scene. There's so many bands of that jingle jangle thing. Even in the 70s version of the Flaming Groovies would do that jingle jangle thing. It's a term, and it's because of Roger McGuinn. Obviously, his vocals are great, but the soaring beauty, the higher tones of David Crosby, tempestuous David Crosby, but the way they blended with the songwriting and front persona, a little bit of a shyness of Gene Clark, and of course Michael Clark on drums, a great band. Now the second half of the career, things changed and Roger McGuinn was the only member. However, that stuff is brilliant. You have one of the greatest country rock acoustic electric guitar players ever of the 1960s into the 70s of Clarence White. Him and Gene Parsons, the drummer at the time, invented the B bender for the Telecaster, and he just soared. Listen on Untitled to Chestnut Mare and listen to that guitar, the acoustic guitar. They became a bit of a jam band, but great things. They would do, 18-minute versions of 8 Miles High and Mr. Tambourine Man, and they were a great, great band, even in that incarnation, and they need to be remembered more. Younger Than Yesterday with So You Want to Be a Rock and Roll Star, and of course, you can't deny that they were like really the band that made folk rock popular, taking the Dylan song, Mr. Tambourine Man, adding that great 12-string Rickenbacker intro, making that such a huge hit, made Dylan songs more popular for the masses, like Peter, Paul, and Mary did as well. And then there's Turn, Turn, Turn on their second album. Taking that Bible passage from Ecclesiastes, Pete Seeger turns it into a song, and they do a folk rock version of it. That jingle jangle thing throughout it. There's soaring harmonies. One of the answers to the Beatles, and just made great records and great soaring vocals and harmonies. What a great friggin' band, the Byrds. You can't deny their greatness. They are one, along with R.E.M., the two great American bands of all time. No lie. Number 2, the Kinks. Ray Davis. Yes, he calls himself Ray Davis. His brother does say Ray Davies, Dave Davies. Mick Avery, John Dalton. This is 1969. This goes back and forth as my favorite album, Arthur. Very conceptual, beautiful record, soaring harmonies, great arrangements. You know, after the early days of Shal Talmy producing their records, Dave and Ray would work together, but Ray would produce all the rest of the Kinks records their entire career. They're such a great band. They really kind of started with You Really Got Me and All the Day and All the Nights with that great kind of hard riff that metal bands and punk bands would emulate. So simple, that ripped speaker in that small amp that Dave had that became one of the great singles. Tempestuous time after a Union skirmish on one of their American tours. They got banned for 3 almost to 4 years coming to America. Some say that's why Ray's songs became more typically British, beautifully British, quaint British writing, suburban London, Muswell Hill, everyday Monday life in England. Of course, later he would emulate that and do more at RCA with the theatrical years. I think those are brilliant records too. They didn't really catch on as much, but you know, Waterloo Sunset, not on this record, is probably one of the best records as well in the 1960s. Great lyrical content, great arrangements, great playing. You can't forget the Kinks. They're one of the 3 greatest British bands ever, and they're my number 2 band. But a lot of you already knew that. So number 1, you know who it is. It's the Beatles. I picked Sgt. Pepper. It's not my favorite album, but it's the album that represents the 1960s more than any other record. And I've said this many times on my channel. You had to be there. Now, this is a great album, but it's been so overdone, so overplayed, so over copied, cover as well as musically. Nothing was like this when this album came out. Now, people were working independently. Pink Floyd was doing some weird stuff. SF Sorrow by The Pretty Things. You know, that's just in terms of conceptual. I mean, this isn't as conceptual as it appears, but no one did a cover like this. No one put the time and expense and the creativity. Nobody put lyrics on the back of their albums. This represented so much in June 1967. It's that perfect stereo thing. Of course, you hear John Lennon or George Martin say, if you haven't heard Sgt. Pepper in mono, you haven't heard Sgt. Pepper. Bollocks. Bollocks, I say. Stereo is the one. Headphones, stereo. But speakers, stereo, the spatial thing. Now, I love the mono version. It's more of a rock and album mono. It's more of a spacey, experimental thing from 1967. But of course, the Beatles, in terms of the band, every album they made, you know, after maybe the third album, starting with A Hard Day's Night on, was just, they pushed it forward. They tried things that no one else did. They weren't resting on their laurels, just doing the same old sounds, the same old riffs. Lennon McCartney, obviously, great songwriter. George Harrison didn't get his full due, but, you know, the balance was there. And Ringo kept time like no one else. And, you know, he always talks about how Rain is his favorite drumming thing. Rain is a perfect record, and listen to the drumming on record or anything on Revolver. Revolver is my favorite Beatle record. But Sgt. Pepper represents this amazing band. You know, there are people that like the later period. You know, people always cite Abbey Road as their best record. I love Abbey Road, of course I do. But I don't think it's in the top 3 of their albums for me. It's their best recorded record by the time technology happened in '69. Of course, it was really well recorded. It was a mature record in a lot of ways. There's so much going on. But I really like how they would experiment in the studio. They didn't have the benefit of computers, which is so good because they would try things like, you can't do that. You can't use a big giant speaker monitor as a microphone. Sure we can. Fix it. You can't edit this version of Strawberry Fields with that version of Strawberry Fields because they're in different tempos and different keys. Fix it, George. And he did. So the brilliance of the Beatles with George Martin, of course, and their Norman Smith, and then later Jeff Emmerich, and the engineers they worked with over the years is just astounding. And in those, 8 years, 7 years, 8 years of recording, the output they put out of those brilliant records, no one has come close since in terms of creativity and sales. So they stayed commercial with experimenting, and that's hard to do. It was a different world then, and it's amazing they had the power and the security to do it. They didn't worry about what was going to sell or not. When they put it out, it would sell. So number one, Mazzy's list of the best bands ever, the Beatles. If you stayed with me, I appreciate it. Thanks for watching. Don't tell me I forgot Judas Priest. Wait. Don't turn it off. Don't go watch some other video now. Just 1 second, please. 2 bands that I totally forgot about that should be in these top 25 bands. Who do I take out? Who would I put in? I'm not going to make that decision. You can if you want to try. But 2 important bands. One is Traffic. The second album to me is their best, but I love them. What a great group. The soulful singing of Stevie Winwood and also the great singing of Dave Mason at this point. Great flautist and reeds of Chris Wood, and of course, great percussion of Jim Capaldi. This is a great friggin' record. But the band that has to be included in the top 25 bands of all time, the band. And of course, there's music from Big Pink, but the second, their self-titled Brown album, the second album, this is it. So those 2 bands should be in this top 25. Who should I take out? Mazzy loves you.